Hello there. Welcome to my first dev log of my game. I'm a game designer and this is Cybernetic Strategy, a cyberpunk robot-themed auto-battler heavily inspired by teamfight tactics. I wanted to make something due to my love for TFT and in the goal primarily being to make an auto-battler that was as simple as possible. This being the first devlog, I wanted to show off some of my progress. This project is currently 4 months into development, and so far, there's a good amount of progress. Currently, on the side, we have a bunch of units and a bunch of classes and origins. Right now, we have 7 1 costs, 4 2 costs, 3 3 costs, 6 4 costs, and 5 5 costs created. The end goal is to make an entire set comprised of around 60-ish characters and around 12 to 13 traits, origins, and classes. So with that, let's get right into it. The trait and the characters I'll be showing off today are from the Shadow Force vertical. Shadow Force units at a base gain magic resist, and after dropping below a health threshold, they briefly become untargetable and gain a bunch of attack speed over 8 seconds. This is a very attack-based, very offensive trait that deals a lot of damage and tries to get fights done very quickly. Tracer Core is the first 1 cost of the Shadow Force line. They're a magic caster with a relatively decently high mana cost, and they have the ability to aim and launch a big bullet at the 2 farthest enemies, and they'll shoot a devastating bolt to each target and deal a decent chunk of damage to each of them. And if there's only 1 enemy left, they'll instead shoot both bullets at the singular enemy. This one, of course, being inspired by the simple 1 cost Caitlyn's from TFT. The 1 cost tank of the Shadow Force line is Steel Shade. Steel Shade is an attack tank of the Shadow Force line, and their ability is to gain some damage reduction and deal some damage to the enemy over 3 seconds. As you can see here, and a very simple, very basic tank. What's cool about Steel Shade is that the damage reduction and their damage scales off of bonus health. And you'll see later, but the class that Steel Shade is part of, Bulkhead, is a class that gives a lot of health. So there's that little fantasy where you can stack up and really invest some health into Steel Shade, and they will end up doing a lot of damage and get a bunch of damage reduction the more bonus health you get on them. Our first 2 costs of the Shadow Force line is Shard Frame. The way Shard Flame works is they have a very low mana cost of 20, and they throw a kunai at an enemy that isn't currently taking damage over time, and they're a big damage over time character, and you'll see they do a lot of damage, and they aim to spread that quickly. And with that super low mana cost, you have that little fantasy of potentially being able to spread those kunais all over the board. And on top of that, the kunais do lower the magic resist of the enemies, so the more you can get, the more investment you get, the more damage you get pumping out, can really lead to burning down the enemy boards as quick as possible. Our second 2 costs of the Shadow Force line is Kuromo Shadow, and they are an attack fighter. And they have a cool little passive where all of their auto attacks do a little sweep, and they'll hit all enemies in a 1 hex cone. And then their active ability will kick the target, and they'll get sent flying back. Very simple, but this small stuff allows for, if you really want to invest in this unit, hopefully in the late game, they should be able to take out a lot of enemies and not get stuck on a really big tank. And what's cool is the more you invest into them, they like when you star them up, that 1 hex cone will increase based on the star level, as well as the the animation of the kick scales with attack speed. So if you want to get a bunch of attack speed, you can get those casts really quickly, and they'll go really fast, and you can maximize your damage output. And yeah, that's Kuruma Shadow. Our 3 cost of the Shadow Force line is Hypershot. Hypershot is a backline magic marksman with a lot of range, and Hypershot's passive is every third attack from them will fire an explosion, which will do a bunch of massive AoE damage to all of the enemies caught within the explosion. And their passive, very simple, just granting them more attack speed. And obviously, the goal is they want to get that third attack off as frequently as possible in order to maximize their damage, because otherwise, them being a magic character, they don't have much damage with their regular basic attacks. A very simple but yet a very fun fantasy where you can mow down teams completely with that AoE splash, allowing units to be invested into without, in the late game, maybe prevent them from getting stuck on singular tanks because they have that AoE damage, which is something you might notice a lot with especially lower cost units. That I believe is pretty helpful for trying to get lower cost units to be relevant to compete with 4 and 5 costs. The primary 4 cost tank of the Shadow Force trait is Iron Veil. Iron Veil is a very simple but unique tank. They're an attack tank with, standard attack stats, but their ability is that they can summon 2 clones with 20% of Iron Veil's max health at 1 star. Obviously, when you start up the units, the numbers will go up, but when a clone dies, it'll explode, dealing some physical damage to that enemy. And as you can see, the clone explosion damage scales with Iron Veil's health, armor, and magic resist. And what's cool is the clones can summon clones, and the health will just keep splitting and splitting. And the fantasy is you can get a bunch of these like 100, 200 health units that'll tank like 1 attack, but they'll stall a lot for your team. And even if the main Iron Veil dies, you'll still have all of these clones coming out and just barely tanking, doing a little bit of damage. But this is I think is a really fun and cool way to overwhelm your enemies. As you can see, there's just so many clones on the board, and it just gets more and more, obviously, because this is a dummy that can't fight back. And then it's just crazy, and I'm personally a fan of this. I think it's fun to watch. I think it's really silly. And yeah, they'll eventually just overwhelm the board. It does have that little fantasy where if you get, maybe you can get that threshold where you overwhelm your opponent with too many clones that they can't kill them all fast enough, and even if they do die, you can see like this clone has 200 health, and they'll do 72 damage. Yeah, it's just really silly. And then our primary 4 cost carry, we have Swift Frame, and Swift Frame is an attack fighter with a lot of base attack speed, as you may notice. And what's cool is their passive is when an enemy, any enemy on the board currently, goes below a health threshold, they'll shoot out these lasers from those back arms and execute them. And then, as you can see here, their ability is they transform their auto attacks into these AoE slashing things that will hit all enemies around them. So if they ever get surrounded, they can really sweep and clean up those enemies, and they'll do a little bit of extra bonus attack, and Swift Frame will gain a bunch of attack speed. As I mentioned previously, this kind of adheres to this really allows melee characters who really need to get in there to shine and be able to clean up. Especially if you invest in a lot of healing and damage, Swift Frame can really clear some boards, and I think they're a really cool and fun and very simple unit. And finally, the 5 cost unit of Shadow Force, Kage. Kage is a very fun unit, one of my personal favorites, as they're a backliner magic caster with a lot of range and a very high mana cost. And the reason for that is their ability is very cool, where they will drain mana from their mana bar, and they'll strike the 4 lowest health enemies, dealing some damage, and then until the mana drains out. And if Kage kills any of the enemies during the time, they will get 10 mana and 5 AP, meaning that they can continue the cast even longer. And something that was really interesting while developing Kage was the use of the way the projectile flows around the enemies. And this was the way the projectile moves was very much inspired by Irelia from set 11, because I learned about this thing called Hermit Spline, which is a math equation that's basically, in a nutshell, allows the projectile to travel in around a figure eight sequence around the enemy. And it just adds an extra flair and really cool kind of effect you see all with all the flashy particles and stuff. It really allows Kage to shine and really feel that impact of that spinning shuriken hitting all of these enemies. And yeah, that's Kage. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching my first devlog. Truthfully, I really don't. I'm very unfamiliar with how to do these, and this being my very first one, I'm kind of just showing off a little bit. Like I mentioned, the project has been this is about 4 months into development, and there's a lot more. But just starting off small and seeing what I can show off, and I'll definitely, as I have time, I will be kind of trying to show off what I have. And maybe this format isn't great. Maybe it's better to just show off things in like shorts or in shorter form content. But hey, if you are interested in seeing how this develops further, please let me know. I would love to take feedback, and if you actually do want to play, I have a small demo of an older version of this. It's like from a few months ago that has like about 6 units and like 5 traits, I believe. That none of these units, but like other units that were like the beginning of development. So if you're interested, I'll link all of that down. Not really sure how I'm gonna do these in the future, but I'll keep trying to do these as much as I can. That being said, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it if you made it all the way here. Oh, and yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a lovely day.